I'm going to go ahead and start us off. So this is our quick overview about us and our project. We are Group 6. We are a limited liability company incorporated within Texas and we decided to mortgage a condo used as a premium Airbnb location in downtown Houston. This location would have amenities on par with a 4-star hotel, thanks to the location being in a first-rate community, along with stellar HOA services. The site is located within walking distance to Minute Maid Park, Shell Energy Stadium, Discovery Green, Toyota Stadium, and George R. Brown Convention Center. We will buy equity of $146,170 shared equally between the 4 managing partners, which is me and the other members of my group. And the equity is for closing and other 0-day costs. The mortgage would be for $351,600 on a conventional 30-year fixed loan with an interest rate of 6.5%. And now
all right. So y'all are using a mortgage.
Correct.
Yes.
All right, because I didn't want y'all to do any mortgages. So, okay, so that's to make it a little more complicated to understand. So I wanted everything on a cash basis. But if you did a mortgage, we're going to have to spend an extra few minutes how you did that, because that makes the case much more complicated. So we'll see. Okay, I was hoping y'all wouldn't do that. Okay, let's keep going then. All right, I'm understanding slowly. Okay. So I understand, good overview. I understand the case other than the mortgage. So it sounds good. All right, good introduction. All right.
Okay, so next we will go over our summary table. So here our overall recommendation. Using our assumptions we found, we recommend the base case and the best case. The worst case and the break even, we highlighted red because we do not recommend. So here on the worst case and discounted payback, you could see we put not applicable. And this is because our NPV will always be negative and not go positive. So under the worst case scenario, the simulation only takes out more depth. So no matter how much time periods we add, it only takes on more depth. That's why we couldn't put a number right there. And I'll pass it over to Josh for the assumptions.
Okay, so our assumptions basically consist of 3 major sheets. One sheet that has the majority of the assumptions on it. And when we met with you, you recommended a little bit more refinement to our case. And so we added 2 supplementary assumption pages, and that's the Airbnb occupancy and the mortgage costs. So first I'll go over the Airbnb occupancy, and I think you'll see that this includes more in line with what you thought we should recommend for this case. And so within the state of Texas, there are 3 seasons that seem to be more opportune for people to come here. And it's a little bit different than the rest of the country. Obviously, we all live here. We know why. It's the heat. And so what we did was we looked at the national occupancy, and then we also compared it to the Houston downtown area's tourist time frame. And what we determined was, in our base case, we wanted to go with the 65% occupancy, which is well above the national average, but due to the events, the surrounding location, and everything that was within walking distance, this seems to be prime area. In addition to that, what we did was we broke it out by 65% in the base, spring, fall, and winter. And then we also have a base for summer. And so you'll notice that it drops down to 45% occupancy. And we also have the standard rate, which goes with the 3 seasons where we have more occupancy. And then to entice people during the off season, we did drop our rates. This is basically done fairly simple. It's not as difficult as it looks. But basically what we did was we took this day plus this day, and that gives us a total occupancy of 219 days with a projected income of 85,000. And so it's pretty simple. It's
that makes sense.
Okay, so that's how that is. And then the best case, adjust it to 85% and 50%. And then the worst case is 50% and 3%. Any questions on this piece?
No, that makes sense. That's good.
Okay. So the amortization is here along with the mortgage. And so I actually had a person that I know from Homeward Mortgage actually run this scenario. So this is more realistic data. And what they did was they looked at the address, they targeted it for a 30-year fixed investor fixed loan. And the purchase price was $439. The down payment that they projected was 20% at $87,000 with a loan amount of $35,000 total. And the interest rate for the loan would have been about 6.5. Obviously, that could go up or down in a final situation, but that's what they projected it at. And so our PD, which is the property, income, tax, and interest, or insurance, excuse me, came out to about $3,738. And if you break it out, the estimated cash to close is $113,000. And because of that, that's why our loan is actually only $351,000. The interest rate, it's just like the problem for the test. We took the interest rate, divided it by 12. The time of the loan is
okay. Yeah, I don't need that. I'll trust you on that one.
All right. So the one thing that is unique to our base case here is that the time to pay off. And so each one of the scenarios or cases has a specific time threshold that they identified that to pay off the loan. And you'll notice that it's based upon the amortization schedule.
Right.
Okay. And so those are the supplemental. On the assumptions, it's really broken out fairly simply. We do have different types. And the different types deal with different cases. So for example, anything with the home, you could click on here and just say, I only want to see the things related to the home, the security system, or various other components. The sources are clearly identified. We tried to make sure that every source was provided with a creditable location. So for example, if we said flood insurance, it's not just something that we made up, it's something that we actually compared to a site to generate the cost for that. If it was energy or utilities, it actually does reference the Houston utilities, and it references it down to kilowatt per hour or to the power. Separately, we have the actual source sheet where you can actually click on any one of these and it will actually take you to those locations. And then of course we have the base costs, the best costs, and the worst costs, or the worst case, excuse me. We also have the range. The range is not as difficult as it looks. What it simply does is it says, hey, I would like you to look at this spreadsheet within column I. Anything with the year 0 is a year 0 cost. And then if that is true, I want you to go ahead and add the cost on the case itself. And you'll see that when it's shown over when we get through the cases. The annual cost is basically any cost from year 0 that's an annualized cost. Those are things like the mortgage itself. We know that we have to pay the mortgage every month, so we give you the annualized cost for the mortgage. One thing that's unique to our thing is that we have a lot of technology built into the home, and that's simply because we have younger and younger folks that are interested in technology. And so our home actually has 1 gig fiber in the home. And to protect the home, we add things like a firewall subscription, the ability to remotely turn off the utilities, the ability to actually turn off the gas via a stove unit. We can actually turn off the gas remotely. And those things that we did were really to address a lot of intangibles. And so you can see that our incorporation is our first one. A lot of things can happen when you start up a company. We have 4 people. We wanted to make sure that the 4 people couldn't find themselves in a legal situation. And so the company could go bankrupt, but the 4 of us would walk away with our personal income fine and dandy. But that's why we did that. We have other intangibles, for example, this is a very strict homeowners association in this specific building. And what it requires is the clientele that we're specifically looking for require a 4-star style kind of condition. And so we wanted to make sure that they came into a homeowners association, not just with the amenities, but also with the expectations that guests and homeowners within the homeowners association have a strict code to make sure that everything is good. That reduces the likelihood of getting our property damaged, and also ensures that we get return customers. We have quite a bit of insurances, probably more than others, and it's just primarily because of the condo itself. We don't have just homeowners insurance. We have homeowners insurance specifically for tenants. Even though Airbnb does provide a degree of homeowners insurance to return the property in case somebody from Airbnb damages the home, that can take time, and taking time away from any of our cases actually increases our costs. We need the home available and on the market as quickly as we can. If we do have to pay deductible for maintenance, we can. Flood insurance is obvious for Houston in case of a hurricane or a flood in the area. Here we have the Airbnb sheet for search logistics. And what this does is this provides the national average for the location itself. And what this does is this drives our assumption. There are a lot of intangibles on why people would or wouldn't choose a home, related to COVID. And so we wanted a lot of data around what is the probability and likelihood of this scenario being successful. For furniture, what we did here in this scenario is that we took an alternate approach. We didn't want to add additional 0-day cost if we can get away with it. I found a company that specifically deals with renting of furniture. They do have specific fees if the furniture is damaged. Airbnb furniture goes very quickly. I didn't want to find myself spending $20,000 to $30,000 on furniture and then having to replace it fairly quickly. So this assumption basically takes care of children damaging the furniture itself. The idea of the home is that it would be fairly modern looking, and that furniture can come damaged fairly quickly. Other intangibles are things on our electronic gear. You don't know when the electronic gear is going to go bad. And so we wanted to make sure that we were doing tech refreshes on the gear. And we also associated a maintenance cost. The maintenance cost is a little bit further down. But before I get into that, I just wanted to show some of the technology in the home to protect some of the intangibles that we have here. Obviously, when we're dealing with cyber, there's cyber threat security, whether it's man-made or weather. And so this deals with that, and it ensures that our network won't be turned into a bot and used to attack others, or more importantly, somebody isn't getting into our network and causing damages to our home, especially because there's so much electronics built into it. Here is the ecobee smart remote thermostat. And obviously that's to maintain utility costs and keep them down as low as possible while keeping the customers comfortable in the home. We also have that iGuard stove, which makes sure that we can remotely turn off the stove and that it has the ability to auto turn off if it notices that someone isn't actually using it. We do have the Ring video doorbell for security, and we want to make our customers feel as comfortable as possible, but also we want to monitor the home. On the garage, we also have a Ring flood cam so that we can actually see when people are coming in and out. We have the cleaning services, which will make sure that the home is safe and clean during the duration. Our assumptions are that they would come in weekly, regardless as to whether or not there's people in the home. And then, of course, we have maintenance on the home. This was very important. We found references that basically said between 1% and 4% is utilized for the total value of the home. And so what we did was we have a base case at a specific one, which is 2%, seemed fairly reasonable. And then the best case scenario is we wouldn't find ourselves under any damages. And then the worst case scenario, we wanted to make sure that we provided maximum protection, and so we included that 4%. Last is we have a remodeling. So at the point that we actually sell the house, we wanted to remodel the home and return it back to its base, its sellable fashion, excuse me. And in this specific one, we included $21,000 for the base case, and you'll notice that's 0.35% of the value of the home. And then we did the same thing for the best case. And then to make sure that things aren't difficult in that respect, we also maintained it in the worst case. So there are scenarios like the mortgage where we maintained one case for all to keep it a little bit less complex. But for the areas that we did, you will notice that it does have impact, and each team member will go over where we have increased costs and lower costs. Any questions, sir?
But it's extremely well for research. So the one thing I could not tell in your spreadsheet was what you're doing with the resale. So walk through those resale numbers again, because I was not following that when I was trying to.
It's better to actually see that on the base case because it references a few things. But basically what we do is we first need to look at the new value of the home. The home will certainly appreciate over time. And what we did was we appreciated it 2% per year. And what it essentially does is it says, hey, first, what I'd like you to do is go get the value of the home as it exists today. And that is F13. And that is just the value of the home itself, which is 439. And then what it says is I'd like you to appreciate the home at 2%. And then I'd like you to grab something very specific from each case. And so each case, you will notice these numbers at the bottom, and they auto-populate, so it doesn't require a person to do anything. It's just as you change these time durations, what's going to happen at the bottom is it's going to say, that's a period that could be an interest. And so it counts the number of years, and it says that's an interest period that's going to appreciate the value of the home. And that is that piece that, that increased the rate. So it'll take the original value of the home multiplied times 2%, multiplied by the periods that the 2% needs to be by, and then it re-adds the original value of the home. And so you can see that it's 615,300, 615,300, and 615,300. And that's in that scenario. Then what it simply does is it says, now that I have the value of the home, I know that I have to remove some of the value of the home. So I need to first remove the amortization or the mortgage cost that you have to pay back to the bank. And then I have to pay back the remodeling cost as well. And that's how it comes up to the value of the home. You'll see that more clearly in the base case, the best case, and the worst case. And my partners will go over that with you.
461 is 448. How many years are you doing?
It's a 30-year loan, but it'll
No, but
depend
how
on
many
the
years?
individual case.
When are you selling it? So you start in 2023 and you're selling it.
So are you on the assumptions mortgage cost tab?
No, I'm on base case. I'm not in your spreadsheet.
Okay.
I'm watching you.
Oh, I'm sorry. So
Okay.
yeah, so what it does is it says, hey, I want you to grab assumptions from 40 and again, minus them in the order. So if we go back to the assumptions,
615 minus remodeling minus the outstanding mortgage, or it's
that's
outstanding
correct.
mortgage.
Yes.
So the right. Explain the 132 versus the 317 on your assumptions on your
Here.
home base on time periods within.
So this comes down to the amortization schedule. So here, what it does is it says, hey, I noticed that we have 30.
That's how much you've paid off, not how much is still remaining.
This is what we have to pay off to the bank.
Still have to pay off. You've already paid off, because I'm not understanding why the best case is higher than the worst case.
Yep.
The best
So
case.
if we look at that, you'll notice that the interest periods are 20 in the interest periods, and the base case, we only have 6 interest periods that we hit. So if you go back to, or if we switch over to here, what you'll see is in the base case, it takes the value that we had here, which was 20, and it multiplies it by 12 because that's the number of months here, and says, hey, at 240, the cost is going to be 132 that we have to pay back to the bank. Whereas in the best case, we only have 72. And because we have a lot more interest to pay and schedule, we have a much higher payback to the bank.
Yeah, I'm not following that at all. Okay, so the base, they're all the same 30-year mortgages, all 3 cases?
Yes, but our specific thing, so you'll notice all of these have the same 30-year mortgage amortization. And if we go down to 72, it is 323 that we need to use for the payoff. Right.
So why are you using 72 on the best case? I'm not following that. What does 72 mean? That you were going to sell the house?
72
after 6 years?
Yep, we sell the house much sooner. So I'm stealing my thunder away from my team. I'm only answering the question though. But you'll notice that we pay off under the base case at about interest 20. But on the best case, because we have so much profit that's coming in with the most idealized scenarios, we pay off much faster. And so it's only those 6 interest periods. And that's 6 times 7 is, or 6 times 12 is what you'll see in that mortgage, which is 72. And so 72 on the payback is much higher.
So you're saying that as soon as it goes positive net present value, you're going to pay off the debt? Are you going to sell the house?
That's what we're saying.
Okay. All right. That's a little hard to follow. But okay. So is there a reason why you assume that? Why wouldn't you have them all go the same period of time?
We didn't go the same period of time, basically to show why we really wanted to show the value in these accept thresholds, because we thought it was more important to show the goals of the project.
But your resale is the same in all of them, isn't it? Okay, good.
No, they are not.
Yeah, but I mean, your 615 is the same in all of them. That's not, I'm not understanding.
Oh, yeah.
That. 615, even though it's 6 years or 10 years, so I'm not understanding that. I understand the mortgage outstanding being different, but I'm not understanding why the resale of 615 is one's after 6 years and one's after.
Actually, what it is it would need to be fixed. This value right here would have to be adjusted for the best case and the worst case. Right now, what it's simply doing is referencing the base case as a simplification of the problem.
So your best case is only appreciating the house for 6 years at 2% when you resell?
It would be, yes.
All right. Yeah, you can see why it's tough to get through the spreadsheet. I mean, it's very well researched. It's a quite advanced Excel spreadsheet, but when you're a reviewer, man, it's hard to figure out what you're saying. So I'm just trying to understand your assumptions then. You're saying as soon as this thing goes net present positive, we're going to sell the house. If that's after 6 years, we're going to take the $440,000 cost, raise it at 2% for 4 years, have some refurbishment costs. We're going to sell it. If it goes positive after 18 years, then in 18 years, we'll sell it at a price. So your base case resale should be a lot lower than 461, I would assume, because you have a lot of mortgage outstanding, but you also have a lot less house appreciation. So if you go to your best case, 275.
And the reason is because it removes the bank payoff of 317.
Well, that's my question. It should be the bank payoff, and it should also be 15 years or 14 years less appreciation. That's the part
correct.
I'm not.
I just didn't build that in due to the complexity of that. It's not difficult. I would just have to change a few formulas.
Right now, this in the best case, assuming you got 615 for the house.
It is currently assuming that.
Okay, so that's one. Okay, so that's probably exaggerating, because that would probably give you a 10% appreciation to house or something. Okay, so I was 712 calling that. Okay, I think I'm understanding. It's very thorough. Y'all thought of everything, so you're obviously thinking this is a live case. You got around my issue of the mortgage, and that you got the mortgage the whole time. So it does change your discount rate quite significantly if you use a mortgage and don't use a mortgage. I don't know what discount rate you're using. You can't use the WAC if you're using if you're putting a mortgage in there. Remember, I did that whole class on the mortgage. If you include the mortgage, your cost of capital is not WAC. Your cost of capital is cost of equity. So it's going to be 12, 13, 14%, not 5.5%. But
that's okay. We maintain both just to do it, but this scenario doesn't actually use the WAC except in the internal rate of return. But the numbers are still the same, whether they're really 5.5 or the 6.5 of the mortgage. You'll notice that it's still 11.55. Here,
right, the IR will be the same, but your net present value would change quite dramatically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the reason I did not want you to use mortgages, because it does complicate it quite significantly. Remember, if I did the whole presentation, I think I spent almost an entire class. If you do it with and without a mortgage, you get two different answers, and you have an error in your cost of capital. So I recommend in not doing a mortgage. you're wanting to look, because I think you're probably more of a real estate person. Real estate people prefer the mortgage because they like to see things on a cash flow basis. You can do that, but then you've got to use the right cost of capital. And so I've seen a lot of real estate people grossly exaggerate the net present values because they use WACs when they should be using cost of equities. But so it complicates it. So I mean, it's impressive that you set all that up there. So you're showing really good sophistication with how to handle the mortgage in Excel. So I might disagree with you on how to handle the appreciation and the cost of capital. But I'm impressed with how it's set up. So, okay, I think I'm understanding it. So I think I see a few areas I would probably do it differently, but okay. But I'm very impressed with the research and the Excel sophistication. Okay, sorry to interrupt you. I have to understand it while we go, or else I'm going to be lost while you're talking to your base cases.
It's okay. So for our next base case, Natalie, I turn it back over to you.
Okay, so here on our base case, we can see that it's pretty much set up like application 4. We have our benefits, our costs, and our net. And on the time periods, you see that some of the time periods will be bolded, and those are referencing the tech refreshment that Josh went over in the assumptions. And the days rented here, we have 219 out of the 365 in a year, and that comes directly from our assumption from Airbnb. We have a 65% occupancy. And here on the first fees collected under the benefits, it's what we charge the customer times the number of days times the rate, which will give us our profit. And under the cost, we have the cost of doing the loan and all the 0 days costs that Josh went over, which is the security system, the firewall, and any other tech refreshments. Our FTE here, we decided to have no employees, but under here, we do have our cleaning services. And if you notice, our costs do go up, and that is due to the inflation. Our subtotal cost.
And Natalie, where did you say the mortgage is in this? Is in column F?
And yes, column F.
What are Airbnb costs? And they charge you what, like 3% of the revenue or something?
Yeah, they charge you 3%. And our subtotal cost would be our Airbnb cost plus our labor. And next we have our net, which would be both subtotal costs added together, which gives us our cash flow. And our cumulative NPV, we do use the NPV formula. And on the annual NPV, we do the current minus previous time period. And on the payback, we do use the more complex formula you showed us how to use, which gives us our NPV. And the bottom assumption, which we could see on row 32, would be that once we go positive, we do sell the house. So here we have our amortization, which is 24 time periods, which is the total value of the home plus the 24 periods minus depreciation minus what we have to pay the bank here on bank payoff. And yeah, here we have our net present value, which we accept because the NPV is greater than 0, our IRR, which we accept because it's greater than the WACC, and our discounted payback, which we accept because it's less than the discount period assumption of 30 years.
One thing we talked about in class, I'll probably let you do it because I can actually kind of see after selling my mom's house. I usually make line 32, not use the mid-year convention. Instead, I would make it 5/7/2042 that you sell it right after your last tenant leaves. And Josh, you might have a better idea of this. That's assuming, because remember, that's the mid-year convention. The house gets sold all in one day. It's not a cash flow you get over time. So I would, if you don't like using 5/7/2042, assuming you can't sell the house the day after your last tenant leaves, I can kind of see that. Right now, I'm going to assume that because you're keeping that plus 365.25, you're assuming that you sell the house 6 months after the last tenant leaves. That seems, or actually 6 months later, because remember the New Year convention, you're assuming that goes from 5/7 through 5/6. So yeah, if you do that, if you do 5/6/42, then you're assuming, so, I think you could assume it takes you 2 or 3 months to get the house sold. I don't think he would assume 6 months. So if y'all see my point there. You want to sell the house, you want to stop adding the 365, but you don't have to make it E3 or, don't have to say you sell exactly the day after the tenant leaves. But I wouldn't just keep copying down though. If anything, I would say, hey, it takes us 3 months to sell the house or whatever. So the way you have it now, I don't know if Josh, if you're the one who made that change, you assume the tenant leaves and the next day you sell the house. So even that, I kind of grant you, that's the way I recommended to set it up. But I grant you that's a little extreme. Joshua, I doubt it has a huge impact on your NPV, but it can because you're 10 years out and 6 months. It's such a large number. It could add several $1,000s. I think. I don't know, Joshua, what difference did it make? So you got 160,000 now. Control Z, you can go back and see what it gives you. 156. So it added what, about 8,000 or so front change. So 156, do the front arrow change. You know how to do that?
Yep, already done.
So it's about a 5. So it's not a huge difference. That's not a big deal to me, but if someone looking at the spreadsheet and understands the mid-year convention, it's just strange to continue to mid-year when you sell the house because you're going to do all that on one day. So anyway, so it's not that material, but I like precision just so the person that's making the decision is comfortable. They're going to be very comfortable with your assumptions because I can tell you did a lot of research on the assumptions. So getting into the Excel, it does the kind of things that just gives you more confidence. I think the Excel's set up well. So my disagreements is on the discount rate you're using, but you have a pretty good internal rate of return. Whether that's high enough to cover your cost of equity, I don't know. Real estate's a pretty risky investment, but so okay.
Did you want to continue? I know that we're at time. What would you like to do, sir?
Well, we've got Emily and JJ and Andrew, and they're on my 6:30. Can y'all wait a little bit? Can y'all let Brian and Brian know we're gonna be a little late?
Yeah, we can wait a bit. It's fine.
Okay. Yeah, Joshua, I knew this was gonna take some time because your spreadsheet, it's kind of the good news, it's extremely sophisticated spreadsheet. The bad news is an extremely sophisticated spreadsheet. So I'm 60 years old. It takes me a little while to that's why I always like to, have one good session before the end, so I know the spreadsheet. That way, I'm not figuring out the spreadsheet during your presentation. So okay, go through I think I understand the best and worst case. So just quickly hit the differences.
Okay, Mackenzie.
Okay. Going quickly through the best case, we can see that we were able to flip positive relatively quickly, with only with less than 5 years actually to get positive. And this is because we are lowering our operating costs, mostly homeowner insurance and flood insurance. And we also upped our occupancy up to 85%. As we can see, the days rented increased from the base case. And then once again, at the end, once we break even, we chose to sell the home. Our net present value, internal rate of return, and discounted payback are all accepted for the same reasons as the base case. Net present value was accepted because our NPV was greater than 0. Our internal rate of return was higher than our WACC, and our discounted payback was accepted because it was less than the discount period assumption of 30 years. So that's just a quick overview of our base case or our best case.
Okay, are y'all ready for the worst case?
Yeah.
Okay, so starting off with the number of days rented, it's much lower than the base and the best case at 50% occupancy or 164.25 days out of the year. Coming over to our cash flow, we can see that it gets increasingly more and more negative as time goes on, and this will be due to a large increase in our operating costs. Things like the utility bills, security costs, and the furniture renting expenses. As we can see, the payback period is always going to be 1, and it never pays back, and therefore the discounted payback does get rejected. The internal rate of return is also rejected because it is less than the weighted average cost of capital of 5.5%. And the NPV is also rejected because it's less than 0. And within this scenario, using the worst case assumptions, the NPV will never go positive.
Yeah, I'm surprised that IRR even gave you a number, because usually IRR is you have to have positive cash flows. You don't have any positive cash flows anywhere, right? So I'm not even sure why. I guess the IRR gave you a positive because you have that one positive number at the end. So yeah, I would assume your team would, if you had this situation after 6 months, after a year, you would just sell the property and get out and cut your losses the best you could. Hope you get some value out of the house, pay off the mortgage, and just call it. You wouldn't just keep losing money like this year after year. I don't know, how long do you think you'd have to go before you say this isn't working? Maybe the first year you say, well, we're still getting up an Airbnb, people don't know. So how fast is an Airbnb? Is there a ratchet up period of time, or should you be experiencing your full tenancy the first year?
Joshua, I'm not sure
Sure.
about if you wanted to handle it.
So one of the things that we did was we did certainly research Airbnb in the area, and it already has a great presence. And so very quickly, I think the first year what we do is we'd say, okay, that's an anomaly. We could associate that with perhaps some people don't know about us yet. They don't realize the difference between us and why we cost so much more than the standard Airbnb. And maybe that comes down to investing a little bit into marketing, or having a marketing survey done to see if we made a mistake in our assumptions and that we just can't operate this. So I would think by year 2, we would have a much better indication of what's going on, and where we would probably pull the plug is well before we get to the point of adding another tech refresh cycle, because every time that we do that adds much more to the scenario where we go in the hole. So like I said, year 1, I think we would know fairly quickly, probably try to address it through some market research and doing some marketing if necessary. By year 2, it wouldn't be an anomaly. It's definitely a problem. And we would have to meet with the partners and probably might want to speak to the bank just to see if our assumptions were a bit off. But definitely by year 5, we would want to pull the plug.
Yeah, I would think even 4 or 5, but yeah. So I mean, that's an intangible benefit of a project like this. You're not stuck with those negative cash flows. You can resell the property. Then you're at the whims of whatever property market that is, whether that's positive or negative. Houston's a fairly stable housing market, but it does have the oil industry and all that. So, okay. All right, let's move ahead just for time. Sorry. This is
Okay. So going quickly through the break-even case, we can see that the number of payback periods is significantly longer than the previous base, best, and worst cases at 177 interest periods. And we did this just to show that no matter how far we would go out, it would stay negative. So this is because we needed to get our net present value to 0, which is why we went out so far. Using the what if analysis, the days rented was altered in order to get the NPV to 0. The days rented at the top ended up coming out to 188.87 days out of the year. So the formula for profit was also altered to take into account the annualized rate, which is solely based on the number of days occupied per year without adjusting for the different seasons. And that rate is seen right next to the number of days out of the year at the top. So our NPV in this case is always going to stay negative and it will not go positive. The internal rate of return gets rejected because it's greater than the WACC, and we would not recommend this project because it's higher than our discounted payback threshold of 30 years. And since the discounted payback in the scenario is 177, it does get rejected.
Right. I mean, your purpose of the break even. So I don't know if you may want to watch Team 3's. They worked out a way to get a break even to work so that they didn't have to go out so many years. So if you go back to your summary table, we have to cut here pretty quick. One thing that would be really great to add to your summary table would be a column on the days rented out. I realize you have the 2 scenarios, the summer and the other seasons, but if you kind of do an average on those, you call it the break even, but it doesn't look like you ever break even because you never get the 0. So not,
We do break even here. You can see it.
so you went out like almost 100 years, or I mean, it's an unusual break even because it's a number of years. So so it's break evens are tough for real estate projects because of the resale. So if you watch team three, they worked in the resale value as part of their
Yeah,
their assumptions.
we did look at theirs, and I don't want this to be a us compared to them by any means. Their reject thresholds didn't change per case. And so I did see that they included the table, wasn't really described what the table did or how it works. I didn't have a copy of the Excel spreadsheet to compare it. But I did see that they added some table next to this case, and they said that they never broke even, but they got fairly close to breaking even.
Right. Yeah, you can't get to zero because of just the rounding problems.
We
Excel, but
did.
they got
we
close to zero.
We took the scenario in application 4, which is actually run a simulation against it. And the simulation against it changed the number of days for occupancy at the rate that we determined. And if I ran that what if scenario against this, whether it's, I don't know, 90, in 2090, the same thing still occurs. It breaks even on that threshold. And what it would do is simply change the number of days that were occupied in there based upon this rate. And so we tried to do it based upon what we were taught in the class with the what if scenario versus trying to finagle a table to show a zero.
Well, yeah, there's several ways. Break even stuff, no question on a real estate project if you're going to do resales because you have so many moving parts. The purpose of the table is to make the claim that the key assumptions are related to each other. Number of nights rented, the rental rate, and the appreciation of property, that those are all related events. It may not be true, but it's logical and it's least in the right direction, even though it may not be quite as mathematical as that table implies. To do some kind of simulation, you could do that as well. That's tough to do with a break even. So instead of doing break even, you're more of kind of doing distribution, which can substitute for break even. So you give someone an idea of here's the simulations and the simulation process at this point. At this point, we're seeing scenarios where we're renting out 47% of the time with these kind of rates, that kind of thing. So it's tough. But your summary table, I would think if you could somehow add the average percentage of days rented out, that would help the decision maker to see how sensitive is of that. Because I think if you're a critique case 3 versus 6, as far as assumptions, one of my issues with case 3 was I felt they were a little optimistic in their vacancy rates. You seem to be a little conservative in your lease out rates. So it seems to be a pretty critical decision. If I were actually doing this, I was deciding to, commit $440,000 of my money. I would, based on your 2 cases, I would spend a whole lot more time on how many days I'm going to actually lease out. And it looks like you did some pretty good research that I would want to utilize to make that decision. So I got the impression y'all really knocked that down. All right. I love what you did on intangibles. If you go back to the assumptions, we don't have time to walk through the intangibles. I don't know how user friendly it is. Are there some key intangibles you haven't talked about that you like to go through? I like the setup. I might show this to future classes as a good way to bring intangibles into the assumptions page so that they don't forget to do the intangibles.
No, I think the biggest intangibles that we wanted to address was customers damaging the property, making sure that we had proper insurance available there, customers mishandling the equipment in the home. Considering we really don't want cameras in the home, we do have it on the external portions. We felt it was an invasion of privacy, so we didn't put it inside. And then also being able to remotely manage certain key elements of the home. Maybe down the road, we could expand that, with remote blinds and a variety of other components. But we didn't want to make this case more complex because it was already fairly complex. And so the 2 main areas that I'd say that we were most concerned with were weather and man-made concerns that could occur, and those were covered by either insurance or they were covered through technology or a higher maintenance or adding maintenance in there to make sure that we can have the money on hand to support the activity.
Yeah, I teach a property and casualty insurance class. I'm kind of curious because I don't do Airbnb or Uber types of things. I'm curious, does the homeowner's insurance or Airbnb include a business income insurance?
I didn't see a business income insurance attached to at least their base policy. They did have something that I forget the exact name of it. I'd have to open up the group meet because we were certainly discussing it. But what it basically does is it just tries.
Is it cost prohibitive to do that, or is it something that's even reasonable to discuss with an insurance company?
Like I said, I'd actually have to go meet with an insurance company for that. It's not something that we ran in our scenarios.
Yeah, that would be pretty fascinating, especially, you have the Houston flood, the business income, boy, you could be out of commission for 6 months. That would really kill your case.
Yes.
If you have business income where they're going to replace some assumptions you made, that would be pretty impressive, but it'd probably be really expensive insurance. That's interesting. That's intriguing. I have to set that up as a paper discussion for my P&C class. So, all right, very, very well researched case. Hopefully all the team members were involved, not just Joshua. So hopefully it was a good spread of workload here. It's definitely very well documented. Joshua, you have a way of really documenting well, and that's good. And hopefully y'all did some research. You've proven that Airbnb is not a simple thing you just jump into and hope for the best. It might work and it might not work. So, all right. So very, very good. Very interesting. And I can almost see your mortgage the way you're doing it. I actually see the logic of that approach. It's intriguing. I'm going to think some about it. I disagree with you on that 2%. I do think that's a pretty serious thing to adjust. But if you adjust for that, Joshua, you can almost convince me that this bringing a mortgage in to see how long until you go that present positive and then you sell the house to pay off the mortgage. I can see the logic of someone doing a project like that, liking that, and then after the end of the 6 years, they don't have to sell and pay off the mortgage. They can keep doing the Airbnb, but they just know that they've covered those initial net cash outflows. There's a logic of that. My approach would be do the case with and without the mortgage, so you can somewhat demonstrate that to them, so you don't get that complication with the discount rate. But you've almost convinced me, but not quite. But I'll definitely bring it up in the next class as a reason for doing it both ways. All right, we're out of time, but if anyone has quick questions, you reviewers, Brian, JJ. Everett, Emily, anyone has quick questions?
Nahab, very good job, guys. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
So we will make these changes and you'll get a version 1.2. But is there anything else that we need to do for the rubric that we may have missed, sir?
No, I think you covered the rubric well. I'm just, there's almost impossible to get a spreadsheet that I'm not going to disagree with something on. That's what finance is all about. So I'm not saying you necessarily have to make changes. If you want to make the change on that 2%, I would love to see the case again, because I think that's material, but it doesn't change anything but that last number in your best case. So it's not a major change.
No, it's very quick. All the changes that you recommended wouldn't be too difficult to do. The logic's already there. I just need to adjust the formula.
It's certainly an example of how to use Excel other than the range names. Well, I'm not a range name person. Y'all may not be the hyperlink phrase that I have. I'm not a range name person because it's just harder for me to get around the spreadsheet. But the way you set up the spreadsheet is very impressive. So it shows really good Excel skills. So I'm not saying, I wouldn't make any major changes to it. It's an impressive spreadsheet. So I'd love to just get the final version, just to maybe show it to students to encourage them that, I have students say, wow, professor, your Excel skills are so good. And I keep telling them, no, they're not. If you're impressed with my Excel skills, then you're not where you need to be. So I'm glad you're getting good Excel skills and wherever you're working. So, all right. Thanks, everybody.